Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler, and you are joining us for our 2014 MMA Award Show edition of Beyond the Cage, where we will go over 8 different categories, giving a winner for each one to go over the year in MMA for 2014. Of course, I am joined by my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. We are also joined by his good friend and listener of the show, Aaron Smith. And, of course, the venerable Ray Flores from ESPN 1000 in Chicago are joining us on hand to go over some of the awards here for MMA. We also have some picks from our friends of our affiliate sites that were not able to join us: Steve Sadler of VigilanteMMA.com, Sean Smith of MMAinsider.net, and Ryan Pickup from MMAforlife.ca. We will also give their picks along as well with ours. And gentlemen, we'll start with Dave here first. How's it going?
Great. Christmas time has passed. Hey, guess who's coming to Detroit in February? He's got 2 thumbs. This guy.
That's not to see me, though.
No, that's not. My wife got me tickets to go see Garth Brooks again, and I get to go to the Joe Louis Arena. So pretty excited for that. Not even 24 hours ago, I got to see the single greatest upcoming manager in professional wrestling. The great Mr. Flores was in action, and I tell you what, for the $10 price tag, it was worth about $1 million. If you go on my Facebook page, you can see some of the videos of Mr. Flores doing work. He knows how to do the manager game, and we even got to see him twerk. That was a sight.
So are you a Ray Flores guy?
I'm definitely a Ray Flores guy.
Sounds good.
Well, Ray, I guess we'll go to you next here. You gotta, first of all, how you doing? Second of all, you gotta answer the Juice's allegations and comments that he threw towards you as well.
Yeah, well, you know what? Happy holidays, guys, to you and all your listeners and stuff. Once again, it's a pleasure to be on Beyond the Cage, and it's interesting, guys, at how we are just a year removed. It seemed like just yesterday, like we were doing the year-end awards for 2013. Now we're doing it here for 2014, so really looking forward to jumping into that. But as Dave, the Juice, mentioned, really an honor and a pleasure to be able to work for Pro Wrestling Blitz, doing the managing for my stable that I have, the Elite. And yes, I was, quote-unquote, twerking as I was out there getting ready to introduce one of the guys that I wrestle, Matty Starr, who's a tremendous athlete and just great to work with and stuff. And he had, I believe, I don't know who it's by, but it was, let me take a selfie, and I kind of busted a move inside the squared circle and having a good time, much to the chagrin of the fans in Joliet. And if you go to Dave's page, Facebook page, you can see some of the promos that I did and stuff. Let's just say it wasn't nice to the Chicago Blackhawks, and a pleasure to have the Juice out, and also a lot of friends and everyone that came out. So, just it's a blast to be able to antagonize the crowd and do a little acting along with, the announcing and ESPN duties.
Hey, Jim, guess who brought a sign that says Flores for mayor?
Who? You?
And Dave will be one of my campaign managers. That's without question. As I head towards 2015 and I try to become the mayor of Joliet, Dave, the Juice Sadler, will certainly be one of my campaign managers.
Nice.
And of course, as I mentioned, joining Dave as our listener of the show, we invited a fan on the show to give a fan's perspective, and that's Aaron Smith. And Aaron, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
All right, guys, we got 8 categories to go over. The first one we're going to do here is Rising Star. Now, this is renamed from last year's award, which was Breakthrough Fighter. We kind of renamed it to reemphasize that this is a younger fighter in the sport, a guy who, or gal, whoever you pick for this award, has kind of just burst onto the scene with either a big win or a crazy finish or a great performance, and has that potential to be a champion and a champion for a long time. So let's start first with a couple of the fellas that weren't able to join us. Steve Sadler from VigilanteMMA.com. He went with Rose Namajunas as his rising star. Ryan Pickup from MMA for Life went with Conor McGregor as his rising star, and Sean from MMAinsider.net, Sean Smith that is, he went with his rising star of Miles Jury. Those are the picks out there. First, let's go to Ray for your rising star selection.
Well, Jim, I have to say that I think it is, and I know this is not going to delight Dave and the Juice, so I will say this, that my glass is half full, might be about half empty. I think it is Conor McGregor, a big win over Diego Brandao in July, stars Dustin Poirier, and you know what, Dave's assessment of what the atmosphere was like, because the Juice was in Vegas for that card, and just hearing the Juice kind of describe it and talk about how ruckus of an atmosphere the MGM was, how the lobby was just going crazy, how there were so many Irish fans that came over from Ireland, and that kind of put me over the top. I saw some YouTube videos, but getting a first-hand account from one of your very own, the Juice himself, kind of put me over the top that Conor McGregor, without question, is the breakout star here in 2014. He's wearing suits that I wish I could wear. He dresses in style, he finishes in style, and he certainly talks in style. So let's see what he has to come in January. But as of 2014, my breakout star is the notorious one, Conor McGregor.
All right, let's go to Dave for your rising star.
You know, Jim, there are quite a few rising stars. You know, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so I won't. You know, I won't argue with anybody's point. But you know, I like the Conor McGregor pick. I think Miles Jury was one that might have been on there.
Yeah,
but,
that was Sean's pick.
Yeah, that was Sean's pick. Yeah, but you know, I'm gonna go a little bit different, and I'm gonna pick Kelvin Gastelum. He went 3-0 on the year. He got wins over Rick Story and Jake Ellenberger, and you know, we've had discussions on if he belongs where he's currently ranked by the UFC. I don't know if I agree with where he is, but I think he's a guy that, if brought along at the right speed and not just kind of thrust into the spotlight way too fast, I think he has the ability to be a champion in the UFC, whether it's at 170 or whatever, wherever he decides to go as he gets older. But you know, he had a pretty good year, so I'm going to go with Kelvin Gastelum.
All right, and Aaron, what were you thinking for your rising star?
Well, Ray hit every nail on every nail on the head. I mean, Conor for me. I like those old school kind of like, you know, the old WWE like Chael Sonnen type talkers, but Conor backs it up. He goes in there and he just throws hands, looks the part, and just everything about him. He's got that charisma, that it factor, and everybody else has a good point, but I just have to. Ray just hit everything that I wanted to say on the head.
I'm sorry about that, Aaron.
Yep, he is. No, that's all right. Hey, you know, that's why you are who you are, man, and we love you and respect you.
I appreciate it.
For my rising star, I guess you could say it's going chalk. It goes with the majority. I like everyone's selections so far, but I just think that going from not relatively unknown, but going from kind of being a guy that the spotlight wasn't on, nobody was really talking about him, then all of a sudden he gets a main event spot in his home country against a former Ultimate Fighter winner, and he's able to dispatch him very quickly in the first round. I don't think anyone's star has risen more than Conor McGregor this past year, and so he, of course, is my pick for rising star. 2-0 this year, 2 straight first-round finishes, both of them being knockouts, including being a top 10 guy in Dustin Poirier. And I know this goes beyond this year, but this guy hasn't lost since 2010. So he has been on a roll, and, you know, Ray mentioned it, you mentioned it, Aaron. The way the guy talks, the way he acts, you know, his demeanor, he has a presence both in and out of the cage, which very few fighters have this day and age. So to me, he is the pick for rising star.
And Jim, but before we move on from Conor McGregor, let's not forget that McGregor injury. So to be able to come off of an ACL injury, he was in the cage in August of 2013, to come back 11 months after that and be totally healthy or really trust his body, go out there into his home country, as you alluded to moments ago, do what he did to Diego Brandao, and then follow that up with Dustin Poirier. I mean, nothing to Sachapot, especially in ACL, to be able to trust your body like that and to go out there and perform as he did, I think speaks volumes. Love him or hate him, but you cannot deny the talent of Conor McGregor, at least what we've seen so far, especially in 2014.
All right, our next category is Female Fighter of the Year. And this was a very interesting year for women's MMA because you kind of had the delay of a lot of women fighting, and that was the fact that Invicta was pretty much gone for most of the year, and that kind of delayed a lot of people from fighting, and that really delayed a lot of people being picked for this category, having years like they could have had in 2013. So it was kind of hard, I think, this year as opposed to last year to really have a female fighter, but I think my pick is pretty good. I'll get to that in just a second, but looking at our friends that weren't able to join us, Sean from MMAinsider.net, he went with Ronda Rousey, who once again stayed undefeated and had 2 knockout victories this year, something that she had not done before previously, really win fights with knockouts, and 2 of them in very quick and very impressive fashion. Also, Ryan from MMAinsider.net went with Ronda Rousey, and Steve Sadler from VigilanteMMA.com, he went with Carla Esparza, who became the first ever UFC female strawweight champion just a couple weeks ago, and by winning the Ultimate Fighter Season 20. So those are our selections there, and with that, let's go to Dave for his selection for Female Fighter of the Year.
I'm going to shock and awe everybody on this podcast right now. My female fighting, or my 2014 best female fighter of the year is Ronda Rousey. A lot of the points that you just made are completely accurate, that there just wasn't a lot of fights that you could put up there. I thought Barb Honchak had a great fight at Invicta, and had she fought more than once this year, I think that you could argue that, because she's been fairly dominant in every fight she's been in. And, that was somebody I wouldn't mind picking. There were some good fights, but Ronda remains undefeated. She's 2-0. She was 2-0 this year. She finished both of those fights. And I do have a feeling I'm not going to pick her next year, though.
All right, Aaron, what were you thinking on the Female Fighter of the Year?
Same thing. You got it, Ronda. I mean, Steve had a good point with Carla, but Ronda's just so dominant. She's been dominating, and especially the year she's had, it's hard not to pick her.
All right, Mr. Flores.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. I would have to say, obviously, I'm across the board, Ronda Rousey. 1:22 of total octagon time this year for Rousey. The fact that after she dispatched of Alexis Davis, a lot of comparisons to being the female version of Mike Tyson. When have you ever heard that when it comes to a women's fighter? You hear it a lot with Ronda Rousey. Plus, she disposed and beat Sarah McMahon in not even 1:10. Sarah McMahon is an Olympic caliber wrestler. I know that Sarah McMahon was a live underdog heading into that fight, and for Ronda Rousey to go out there and do what she did to Sarah McMahon and to be able to change the fight so quickly in the fashion that she did back in February, I think was just remarkable. And as Dave mentioned, she has a huge test ahead of her coming up in February against Katsugano, obviously. But I think without question this year, because of the lack of activity when it comes to Invicta, I think you have to go with Ronda Rousey. I mean, 1:22, you don't get paid by the hour. Apparently, Ronda Rousey doesn't get paid by the 2-minute mark. So Ronda Rousey across the board.
All right, my pick here, I'm going to agree with Steve from Vigilante MMA. I'm going Carla Esparza. Now, if you just look at officially, she's only 1-0. She had a very dominant performance to win and become the first ever strawweight champion, but she had the 3 fights on the Ultimate Fighter, so effectively she went 4-0 this year, beating some of the top females in her division, including former Invicta atomweight champion Jessica Penne. She also beat Tisha Torres, and then she caps it off with the third-round finish there of Rose Namajunas in very dominant fashion. And besides Ronda Rousey, who obviously I think is very deserving of the award as well, I think she's just about the only other selection you could go for. And some of her fights might have not been the most exciting, but I think her fights, the only fight that I think was kind of maybe a letdown, and one that you could kind of, this would be a point against her, would be that fight against Tisha Torres, because that probably should have had a third round. We didn't get the third round. She got the victory, but her fight was awesome against Jessica Penne. She had the first round finish of Angel Hill, and then, of course, like I said, the dominant performance to win the title over Rose Namajunas. So I'm going with Carla here to also change things up a little bit as well.
That's Jim. Jim, the change-up master. You're like, I was going to make a baseball reference. Who's that left-hander that throws no heat whatsoever? All he throws are change-ups.
Is that Bruce Chen?
Maybe you're the Greg Maddux of Beyond the Cage.
Oh, man. I'll take that. Anything just compared with a Hall of Famer and Cy Young winner, I'll take it.
Yeah, but when you go into the Beyond the Cage Hall of Fame, you better tell a fart joke like Greg Maddux did when he went into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I'll see what I can pull up.
If you don't, I'm closing the doors to the Beyond the Cage Hall of Fame.
Oh, man. They're closing them before they were even open.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. Our third category of the year is the most improved fighter. Now, again, to reiterate from last year's, this is supposed to be a fighter who has been around for a few years, whether that's in the UFC, MMA scene, and a person that's, they've won a couple, they've lost a couple, but have just most recently just seemed to kind of put everything together and get on a roll and have been able to kind of get into the top 10 or very near it. And I think quite a few fighters have kind of started to put a lot of things together here in 2014. And starting first with Steve from Vigilante MMA, he has decided to go with Neil Magny. And it's kind of hard to argue Neil Magny, who went 5-0 this year, set a UFC record for most wins in 1 year. And he started last year, or his UFC career rather, with a 1-2 record. So a guy that was very close to being on his way out, and he has now won 5 consecutive fights, and just a great year for him. And all those fights, I think, were on the undercard. So most people, he gets this record, and most of them probably haven't even seen this guy fight once. So that's pretty incredible for him, and he's doing it one of the UFC's toughest divisions, the welterweight division. Ryan from MMAforlife.ca, in his most improved fighter, he went with TJ Dillashaw. This was a guy that lost the Ultimate Fighter to a guy now fighting at a division below him at 125 pounds in Jod Dotson. He had a very tough and close loss to Rafael Asunciao. He was able to win a couple fights, get a title shot against Hennenbrau, beat a guy who hadn't lost in about 6 years, and then on 1 day's notice takes on another opponent and thoroughly dominates him for 5 rounds before getting a finish. And this guy has gone from just simply a young training partner of Uriah Faber to now being the top fighter at Team Alpha Male. And looking at Sean from MMAinsider.net for his most improved fighter of the year, he went with Robbie Lawler. And obviously Robbie Lawler had a great 2013, and this year he got the title shot in March, lost. He was able to come back and do something that he's been working 12 years for, being a professional MMA fighter, and capture a major title, that being a UFC title, and was able to win that. Great accomplishment for him. So I'll give my pick here first. We'll switch things up here. And my most improved, all those guys are great selections, all guys I considered, especially the Neil Magny one, but wanted to go again, like Dave said, Greg Maddux changeup. I went with Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, I know he has a loss this year, but since that loss, his first fight of the year against Khabib Nurmagomedov, he has gone 3-0, knocking out the former UFC lightweight champion Ben Henderson. He's coming off a very dominant performance over Nate Diaz, and looks like he's going to get the next title shot at 155 pounds. And really, up until middle of 2013, this guy was about a 500 UFC fighter. a guy that had lost to guys like Jeremy Stevens, a guy that most people really weren't looking at. And now all of a sudden he's won 8 of his last 9 fights and is about to get a title shot. I don't think a couple years ago, if you would have said Rafael dos Anjos is going to fight for the UFC title, I don't think a lot of people would believe you that would ever happen. And here we are almost in 2015, and that's going to happen. So my most improved is Rafael dos Anjos. We'll go up to Mr. Ray Flores for his pick for most improved.
Well, Jim, I would have to say I agree with Steve. It's kind of like what LeBron James said when he was playing with the Miami Heat. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. Yes, 5 victories in 2014 for the former Torres MMA standout. Now I believe he's at the Grudge Training Center in Colorado. What a year. What a transformation out of Magny. As you alluded to, 3 decision victories, all of them unanimous decisions, so you can't even say he had a split decision, and 2 finishes. He's just a thoroughbred. He's not great at any one thing. I don't even think he's good at any one thing. He's just solid all around. A durable guy, a good worker. I think this is going to make Aaron smile a little bit. He's like he's a solid – right now he's a solid mid-card guy that can work. He reminds me very much of Dolph Ziggler in the WWE, a guy that you can give him the opportunity. He's going to run with it. You're like, go out there and give me a 20-minute match and make it solid and just give me some false finishes. Just be entertaining. And Magny's that. And he brings his hard head every single day. You want to talk about a blue-collar worker in the sport of MMA? It is Neil Magny. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not anything totally remarkable, but just a solid guy that knows his craft.
All right, let's kick it over to Aaron for your pick with most improved fighter.
It was hard for me. I had Lawler and Dillashaw, but I went with Dillashaw. I mean, I had that loss, and he came back and won the championship to a great, great fighter. I had to pick him.
Aaron's getting the short end of the stick. All these people who aren't here keep picking everybody that Aaron has. His sheet is literally right here.
Yeah.
And like everybody that these guys that aren't here are picking everything on his sheet.
I don't want you guys thinking I'm bandwagoning it.
No. I think Dillashaw is a great pick, and I think he would have been a consider not just for most improved, but for a lot of people's fighter of the year had that fight with Barral, the second one, materialized, and not the fight that took place with Joe Soto. And I think that kind of almost robs him of doing that because people look at it as, yeah, he won, but it wasn't Barral. And I think that's why I think you had to give him an award just because of what he did in the year, but it could have even been a better year for him had he had that kind of more satisfying victory in people's minds.
Absolutely. You want my pick, or are we just going to move on?
Nah, I was going to skip it. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead with your pick for most improved fighter of the year, Dave.
Okay, Ray, are you sitting down?
I am sitting down.
Okay, because I don't want your mind to be completely blown, like mind blown. This is totally off the board, and it's not Kat Zingano or Eddie Wineland, so prepare yourself.
Oh, man, I don't know who it is then.
It's not even Ebersol. How about that?
Wow.
I know the only person who has a clue is Aaron because he can see it on my sheet right here. All right. Most improved fighter for the year of 2014. This guy was 4-0 on the year, 4 finishes, coming off of 2 straight losses to end 2013. And now he's ranked number 13 in his weight class. Who am I talking about? One of the youngest guys in the UFC. Max Holloway. Mind blown.
That is a great pick, Dave. Very good pick. I do like that.
That is an MMA journalist right there. That is a combat sports journalist. I might as well say, as Bobby Heenan used to say, a broadcast journalist are you, Dave Sadler.
Thank you. I'd like to consider myself an ambassador of sorts.
That's a good pick, and it wasn't a pick that I don't think a lot of people are considering, but they should, because those are excellent points you brought up. 4-0, and you lost to Conor McGregor. I believe he lost to Dennis Bermudez. Was the other one?
I believe
right?
so. Yes.
So
yes.
he loses to 2 guys in the top 10, comes back, and has 4 straight finishes against other, prospects like him, Akira Corsani, Andre Fili, and is able to knock him out. And this was a kid, I remember when I first saw him, I thought if he could develop that killer instinct, something that it seemed in his first UFC fight he didn't have, if he can go out there and get a couple finishes, he could be scary because he's so long and lanky at 145 pounds, and he's figured out how to do that. Yeah, that's a great pick, Dave. I like that.
Thank you. A little research involved, but hey, I go and find them.
Let's move on to our event of the year. This is the fight card, whether it's main card, the whole card, undercard, however you guys want to describe it, that you thought just from start to finish was the best. And I had 2 options, and I was kind of going back and forth on this. But I ended up going with UFC Fight Night Sydney, which had 11 fights, and all 11 were finishes. I think, at least in the modern day UFC, has not been done before. And my other honorable mention was the poster behind me there, UFC 181. I just thought was a fantastic card as well. But I very rarely watch the Fight Pass fights in terms of like the undercard stuff. I'll watch the Fight Pass main cards, but very rarely do I actually then sit down and watch the undercards. But for this one, when I heard what went on in the undercards, I watched it from the first fight all the way till when Luke Rockhold finished Michael Bisping. And not only were they finishes, they were all pretty fantastic finishes. And I think the most fantastic one was probably the Sweet Chin Music sidekick by Luis Smolka that ended up getting him that 3rd-round knockout victory. So I just thought that was a great event. And the funny thing is, because it was a Fight Pass, I wonder how many people actually went and logged on to the Fight Pass to watch this. It's probably one of the best events that maybe not that many people saw. So my pick is UFC Fight Night Sydney. We'll go to Ray for your event of the year.
Well, you know what, Jim? I was on the fence. I had that strong consideration, but I would have to say, because the UFC's global expansion continues and the significance of this UFC Fight Night in Dublin, that crowd was jacked from start to finish. The first prelim fight till the main event when Conor McGregor just walked right through Diego Brandão. What a card. In terms of how it affected the rankings, was it that massive? No, I mean, Siri over Phil Harris. Gunnar Nelson defeated Zach Cummings. You also had Calvo Pendro. He tapped out Mike King by 2nd round. But it was the atmosphere. It was the electricity. It was what Canada used to be when it came to being with George St. Pierre and them just being just this MMA hotbed. And Canada's still there. But I would have to say that Ireland has surpassed Canada for being this MMA-crazed country. You have a superstar that is a household name everywhere he goes in Conor McGregor. He delivered. He gave them what they wanted, and now they're talking about doing a stadium show at I believe it's Cork Park or somewhere in Ireland if he's able to get up on January 18th. So, guys, I think it was just that ruckus atmosphere, the fact that the fans were just so into the fights, and we're the emergence of Irish MMA, and I think without question they are the predominant big-time country overseas with the exception of the United States.
Hey, I think the name of the park is Crow Park, and the only other person to sell it out is a guy that I really like, and that's Garth Brooks. Just wanted to throw that out there. Just wanted to throw it out there.
Well, Dave, why don't you throw out your pick for event of the year?
All right. There's a lot of events. I know one of them I was going to step on Aaron's toes, but I feel like that's already been done. So I'm not going to do that. So when I'm thinking of event of the year, I want something that had everything. A debuting fighter, perhaps. A grudge match, perhaps. Something that tugs at your heart, like a friend or something fighting. Comebacks, guys that have been out for a long time come back and look good. Title fights, everything. You know what had that? UFC 178. Had a title fight with Mighty Mouse and Kerry Azau. Had the comebacks of Zingano and Cruz, who both looked amazing. Ebersol wins his fight. I was there. Grudge match with Poirier and McGregor. And then you had the one hot prospect that they were trying to get into the UFC, and Eddie Alvarez came in against the fan favorite Donald Cerrone. Especially having been there and having taken quite the long journey to get there, I really couldn't go against any other pick than 178.
All right, Aaron, your pick for event of the year.
All right, I hate to do this, but it's a tie. It's 173 and 175. 173 had Lawler, Ellenberger, DC, and Henderson, who I love wrestlers. That's probably my favorite. And then TJ Dillashaw and Barraro. And then 175 had Hall Santos, Rousey Davis, and Weidman and Machida. I'm just torn between those two.
All right, we can accept that.
Well, thank you.
We can accept a co. You made sound arguments for both, so we'll accept a co. And also, no one else had picked those. So, if it was a tie between other fights mentioned, I would have made you pick one. But
right. Now, I will say if 173 didn't have DC or Henderson on there, I would have went with 175. But both cards to me were just stacked.
All right, let's the picks for event of the year for our friends not joining us. Sean from MMAinsider.net went with UFC 181. Ryan from MMAforlife.ca, he went with your pick there, Ray, UFC Fight Night 46 in Dublin, Ireland. And then Steve from VigilanteMMA.com went with UFC 78. So did he? Oh, did you know his pick already, Dave?
No, clearly the Sadlers are the cream of the crop in MMA journalism. Clearly.
Either that, or he stole off your notes, or you stole off of his.
I think I put a pretty good argument on why 178 was great.
I'm just kidding.
Absolutely did a great job.
P.S. I won $100 too.
On betting on the fights?
Yeah.
Okay.
P.S. I win.
All right. Well, speaking of winning, let's get to the submission of the year category, which I think a lot more interesting this year. We'll get to the knockout one in just a bit, but I think a lot more heated than the knockout of the year selection. But there's a lot of good submissions out there. There's a lot I considered. The two that I didn't go with, I thought was very close. The Yancy Medeiros reverse head crank guillotine Dars choke. That was pretty amazing. That was definitely up there. And then Randa's submission of Felice Herrig on the Ultimate Fighter with that leg armbar thing, I thought was pretty excellent as well. But this one I actually got to see in person, and an inverted triangle's been done, but I don't think it's been done like this. And that was Liam McGarry against Kelly Undinson at Bellator 124, where he's on the bottom in side control, reaches over the top with his legs to grab Undinson's head in a triangle position, and gets him to tap about 10 seconds before the round ends in round number 1. I mean, I don't know if it gets much better than that. I mean, that's an incredible feat for anybody to come back and do that, and for him to do that just before the round ended, very impressive. And I think it also kind of shows, Liam McGarry was a guy you could have probably picked for Rising Star as well, a guy that definitely burst and could become a big star for Bellator. But that was by far, I think, the best submission of the year. All right, let's go with Mr. Flores, your pick for best submission of 2014.
Well, Jim, I must say, bravo on being able to describe that submission. I'm going to go with something a little bit off the board based on there were a lot of slick submissions and guys who have just this are great at grappling. But I'm going to go with what it meant. It was Bellator's first pay-per-view. Everyone thought he was done. It led to a massive main event that didn't deliver, but the ratings were strong. Tito Ortiz's arm triangle submission over Alexander Slamenko. Slamenko had won 13 fights in a row coming into that fight. Ortiz took him down and just kind of overpowered him. Used his wrestling and then got into side control, had the arm triangle, locked it in. And was it the the most aesthetically pleasing? No. But did it have a lot of significance behind it? Absolutely. It was just pure power, pure brutality, and the fact that Tito then was able to parlay that into a quote-unquote grudge match against Stephan Bonner that garnered huge ratings for Bellator. In terms of what it did for Bellator and their overall well-being, I think it is that Tito Ortiz arm triangle submission.
All right, let's go to
Tito Ortiz reference.
Huntington Beach bad boy.
Yes, we did. I think that is definitely off the board, but it shows. But I gotta give Ray credit, and well, unfortunately, and I guess fortunately, myself some credit. You and I picked a non-UFC thing for this category, Ray.
You know what, Chip? That's what I was trying to, I guess, be a little bit of a, I was going back to my character of pro wrestling. I was trying to get something that not a lot of people knew, and maybe not annoy people, but I just wanted, because the UFC is so powerful, and you got to go out something that was off the board, and it did make big business for Bellator.
Yep.
All right, let's go to Aaron. Are you going with something off the board for submission of the year?
Probably not. It's going to be Rockhold over Bisping, the one-arm guillotine.
That was. No, go ahead.
I think that's I think that is a great pick because, Michael Bisping, for all the bluster and all the people that hate him or love him, he's been a tough guy to finish. And so for Luke Rockhold, his fight against Vitor was probably bigger, but still a main event fight in Australia, was able to go in there and finish a guy like Michael Bisping, I think says a lot to how good Luke Rockhold is.
Yeah.
I am going to go, and I bet Steve didn't pick this one. I'm going to go with history on this one. And that was Ben Saunders getting the first omoplata victory in UFC history over Chris Heatherly. Might not have been the biggest victory ever inside the octagon, but it was the first, so I feel like it should get some credit.
And the shame about Saunders getting that is that Joe Rogan was not there to be on the call for this, because how many times has Joe Rogan said, "Oh, he's got him in omoplata"? Like anytime anyone gets anyone's arm locked with their legs, and he said it all the time. It was to the point where it's like, Joe Rogan, no one's ever going to get someone in omoplata. And then boom, what happens? Ben Saunders gets someone in omoplata if Joe Rogan is not there. I think that's I don't know who scheduled the announcers for that, but man, they're probably kicking themselves like, man, how epic would have Rogan's call would have been had he announced that Saunders-Heatherly fight? I think his mind would have exploded.
Mind blown.
All right, let's get to for the fellas that weren't here. Sean Smith, MMAinsider.net, for submission of the year. He went with Charles Oliveira against Hatsuhioki. Very big deal. Hatsuhioki, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, had never been submitted in his career, almost 30 fights, and that young kid from Brazil, Oliveira, was able to do it and defeated him for his great year as well. Ryan, pick up MMAforlife.ca, his submission of the year. Much like you, Dave, the omoplata with Ben Saunders over Chris Heatherly at UFC Fight Night 49. And Steve Sadler from VigilanteMMA.com. He went with the different submission, but it was by Luke Rockhold. But it was when Luke Rockhold defeated Tim Bosch with his version of the inverted triangle at UFC 172. So a different Luke Rockhold. So Luke Rockhold could have a chance to win Submission of the Year with a couple of different submissions, in like a lot of the big other awards too.
Nice.
All right, let's get to Knockout of the Year. This, I think, was very hard because, like I said, there were a lot of great submissions this year, but I don't remember that as many signature knockouts. So I was kind of just rifling through pages and events thinking, man, what was a good knockout, and what was a knockout that maybe meant something? And even though I didn't pick him for Rising Star, Most Improved, or some of these other awards, but I think a guy who grew up right here, just about 30 minutes from me here in Southeast Michigan, Miles Jury, had a very great 2014, and being the first guy to ever knock out former Pride lightweight champion Takanori Gomi in his home country of Japan in the first round, I thought was awfully impressive. And he did it with a straight right and threw more on the ground to finish this one. And I'm going with my knockout year, Miles Jury over Takanori Gomi at UFC Fight Night, Hunt Nelson, back in September. Let's go to Aaron for your pick of knockout of the year.
Oh, you just said it right at the end. Mark Hunt, the walk-off over Roy Nelson. That was it. One-hitter quitter.
Did you think the poking of the eyes at all deterred you from picking that Roy Nelson was claiming that he had in that?
No.
All right, Dave, knockout of the year?
Well, there were 3 that I had listed, Jim. I'm glad Aaron picked the Mark Hunt, so I'm not going to pick that. One that I thought got overshadowed, and Ray, you saw it live just like me, Donald Cerrone kicking, I don't remember the guy's first name, but his last name was Martins. He kicked him like square in the neck, and the dude just like bent over.
True.
Like that was a pretty disgusting one. But the one that I picked was the spinning back elbow from I believe it was an event in China. Dong Young Kim over John Hathaway. I thought that he died. I really thought that Mr. Hathaway had passed away.
Oh goodness.
But it was that thing was brutal.
Yeah, that one, and that was one that came out of nowhere.
Yeah. And it was on Fight Pass. So
another one on Fight Pass.
How many people saw it?
Probably less than when I mentioned the Sydney card. All right, Mr. Ray Flores. Knockout.
You know what? I'm gonna side with Aaron. Normally, I'm gonna step on Aaron's toes this time, and I am going to go ahead and side with him in regards to Mark Hunt knocking out Roy Nelson. Nelson has a beard, both literally and figuratively, and Mark Hunt and whatever. I don't think it was an eye poke whatsoever, but just that the uppercut that decapitated Roy Nelson, and then again, guys, significance-wise, that fight coupled with Cain Velasquez going down led to Mark Hunt getting a world title shot against Fabricio Verdum. Just the stars aligned, and Mark Hunt was observing his work as Nelson. It seemed like it took about 5 minutes for Nelson to crash to the mat, and then the referee subsequently stepped in and waved off the fight. But I would have to say, as Aaron said, the one-hit quitter from Mark Hunt.
And Nelson had never been knocked out before either.
Yes,
that's true.
That's another one. Much like my pick with the Jury and Gomi fight, you add significance to it, and I think that's kind of what we had to search for some of these picks for knockout. At least that's the way I was looking at it. All right, for the fellas that weren't here, Ryan Pickup, MMAforlife.ca, he went with Abel Trujillo against Jamie Varner at UFC 169, which, if I remember, both guys were throwing leather at each other, and Trujillo, his big right hand there was the one that came out on top and sent Varner crashing to the canvas there, so he's going with that one. Sean from MMAinsider.net, he went with TJ Dillashaw's third round finish there of Renan Barão for the Bantamweight Championship, and that one definitely has the significance of being for a title. And Steve Sadler from VigilanteMMA.com, his knockout of the year, it was not Roy Nelson losing, but it was Roy Nelson winning, as he more or less ended the career of Big Nog with his win over the former Pride champion at UFC Fight Night 39 in Abu Dhabi. And I want to add this in. Steve added some commentary for some of these, and he put, I think we all saw this coming. Nelson just crumpled Nogueira like one of those folding chairs you buy at Walmart for that one day, and then you have to throw it away. So that was that was Steve's addition to that, and that is true. Mr. Big Nog definitely crumpled over, and yeah, definitely time for him to hang him up there. All right, let's get to Fight of the Year. This was another very hard choice for me. I think one, I'm going almost went off the board. Almost went off the board. I was very close to picking Pitbull and Curran 2. I thought that was probably the best Bellator fight of the year, and I think very close to this. But I think for its significance, it was a rematch. It was a title fight. and I think kind of, in my opinion, saved the grace of this pay-per-view card, which was starting to look rather gloom, was Jose Aldo against Chad Mendes for the second time to headline UFC 179 in Brazil. And that was just an epic back-and-forth fight. We got to see a Jose Aldo I think we hadn't seen in, I don't know, probably 5 fights or so. A guy really going in there, going for it. And we saw the progression of Chad Mendes from a guy that was pretty much a one-dimensional fighter when he burst onto the scene in the WEC. And now we see a guy that not only has a wrestling game, but has a very good stand-up game to back, and very nearly beat Jose Aldo in his home country. And just a very excellent fight, and my pick for fight of the year. And let's go to Ray for his pick for fight of the year.
I'd have to say my fight of the year, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to kind of side with this potentially, UFC 171, Robbie Lawler. Back and forth affair. I thought Hendricks did enough to win the fight. Lawler was able to compete at that level back in March, if I stand to be corrected, and obviously in December he won the title by split decision. But to understand that Hendricks was in there against a live old school guy and was able to dig down deep in this title defense and get the victory, but to see that Robbie Lawler still could understand with the young fighters of today's era, I think spoke volumes. And just that crowd was on fire. It was just a blood and guts affair. Dave and I talk about this a lot. It's fights like that which entertain us, that have a lot of significance behind it, but they take years career. And we're going to look back in 5 or 6 years and say that Robbie Lawler, Johnny Hendricks, 1 and 2, but specifically 1, took years for them to go out and do what they did. I mean, for our entertainment, I think was just remarkable.
All right. Let's go over to Aaron for your pick of fight of the year.
Well, again, Ray stole my thunder. So
I'm sorry, bro.
No, that's all right. I had another one. I could have went with Dillashaw Barrero, but Lawler Hendricks, the first fight, phenomenal. The second one, same thing. So I had to go with Lawler Hendricks. And we're going to see a trilogy on that one. So I'm looking forward to it. They just go out there and they bang and leave everything in the ring, and so to speak. And I'm looking forward to the third one.
All right, Dave. Fight of the year.
I don't understand how this hasn't been brought up. No doubt about it. 100%.
Brian Ebersol against John Howard? No? No?
That was a close second to what I'm about to tell you. That was a close second.
Zagano Nunes?
Yeah.
Hey, I have integrity, Jim. I looked at every fight and gave it all its equal airtime on my computer. And the best fight of the year, 2014, live on free TV even. Thank you. That was a drum roll. Stephan Bonner against Tito Ortiz.
No, you're not serious with that.
Yes.
In a second, was Rampage, and King Mo was the runner-up.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your real pick? Honestly, I thought you were about to say Miocic State JDS, but I guess I was wrong on that.
No. Ha. Now it's hard to even pick my pick. No. The fight of the year, I had a bunch written down. Of course, you guys nailed them with Dillashaw Barrero and Lawler and Hendricks. Just throwing a couple out there. My pick was Dillashaw Barrero, but some of the ones I was thinking of, I don't think other guys are going to put out there. I thought Jury Sanchez was a great fight because that was the first big name that Jury was able to beat. And essentially, Jury's one fight away from being in that top 3, top 4. And he got his fight against Cerrone coming up. So I thought that was awesome. And the Brown-Eric Silva fight from the Cincinnati card, that was a very entertaining fight. Going forward, what does that do for each guy? Not exactly sure. And I loved Edgar Swanson because it showed just how dominant Frankie Edgar actually is. Cub Swanson is the guy right under Frankie, and he dominated him. So, I picked Dillashaw Barao, but I just give you a little extra input on some other ones that I thought about.
All right, I think going to some of our guys here that weren't able to make it, Steve Sadler, Vigilante MMA, Lawler Hendricks won.
Did he put any commentary?
Yeah, I could throw some in there. He said, not only was this a great fight with a tight decision, I think it signified the beginning of a new era in the welterweight division. With GSP recently departed, the whole division was suddenly wide open with several legit contenders. Plus, it had an added element not usually seen during the GSP era, a fight where we weren't sure who was going to win. So not as funny as some of the other ones, but that was his thoughts there. Ryan Pickup, MMA for Life. I guess he couldn't decide, but he went with Hendricks Lawler rounds 1 through 10. I guess he just continued it on. He just threw them on both there. He couldn't decide which one was better, so he added them together. So Hendricks and Lawler rounds 1 through 10 for Ryan, and Sean Smith from MMAinsider.net for his fight of the year. He went with Hendricks Lawler 1.
Nice.
So there we go on that. All right.
Jim,
Yes.
I'm going to throw a curveball at everybody, including yourself. We're going to go to fighter right now, but I'm going to add a category that we can think about, and then we'll come to it, all right?
Okay.
You have your listening ears on, everyone?
Yeah.
All right. After we do fighter, what is the biggest story of 2015 going to be? All right?
Okay, we're going to do a prediction for 2015.
Got it.
Okay. All right.
Coming up after the fighter of the year.
Coming up after the fighter of the year. All right, fighter of the year 2014. A lot of selections out there. A lot of people you can go with. So with that in mind, let's send it to Ray Flores to give us your best in 2014.
My fighter of the year here in 2014, Jim and Juice, also airing as well right here on the Beyond the Cage podcast and also the live stream, is got to be Robbie Lawler. This guy continues to reinvent himself. He's been in there a dozen years in the sport. He has outlasted fighter after fighter. He goes from the old school and now is still hanging tough with the new school, wins his lifelong goal of capturing the UFC Welterweight Championship back in December. Let's take a look at his year. Lost to Johnny Hendricks back on March 15th. Comes back and destroys Jake Allenberger May 24th. Then follows it up 2 months later with a battle with Matt Brown. Beats him. Then comes back in December, not even 4 months after that, and defeats Johnny Hendricks by split decision. He's 32 years of age. He's originally from Granite City, Illinois, and this guy is living up to where he was a native of. This man is built out of granite. He has a granite chin. He has a granite mentality, and he just has granite in his hands, which is why Johnny Hendricks is without the UFC Welterweight Championship. Robbie Lawler, hands down to me, the OG, the original gangster, continues to shine, making some money, cashing checks, and having UFC gold around his waist. It is Robbie Lawler, the Ruthless One, who is the 2014 Fighter of the Year.
He went back to the militants days, the militants fighters. That's showing my age.
Yeah, he's definitely been around for a while, and he's only 32 years old, and it seems like he's been around a lot longer than that. And let's go to Dave, 2014 Fighter of the Year. Who do you have?
2014 Fighter of the Year, no doubt about it, not Robbie Lawler.
Okay.
No offense, Ray.
Well said.
Oh, good, Juice. I love it.
No offense. I don't care the level of competition that this man fought. I don't care where it was. I don't care how it was. But this man signed a contract to fight 5 times in this calendar year. Put on the gloves, put on the gear, walked into the cage, walked out victorious 5 times in less than 12 months, actually. And that's Neil Magny. So I'm going with Neil Magny for my fighter of the year.
All right, Aaron, your pick for fighter of the year.
Well, I had to narrow down to two, Ronda Rousey, but again, Ray being the he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. I got to go with Ray. Everything that Ray said. I mean, I'm old school too. He goes back to Pat Militant's days when all those guys had a belt except for him. I mean, so Matt Hughes was in that camp. Tim Sylvia. I mean, for that guy to be at the beginning of the UFC and then have to leave and reinvent himself and to come back and do what he did, it's almost like a Rocky story, and you just have to go with it.
All right, for those of our friends that weren't able to join us, Sean Smith, MMAinsider.net, his fighter of the year, Fabricio Verdum. Very good year for him, beating Travis Brown in that main event, and then, of course, he captured the interim heavyweight championship by defeating Mark Hunt just a couple of weeks ago at UFC 180. Ryan from MMAforlife.ca, he went with Donald Cerrone as his fighter of the year. And, of course, we'll get this with commentary from Dave Sadler of VigilanteMMA.com, and he went with Robbie Lawler. So there you go. We'll get to my pick here. It's been picked by someone else that we just mentioned, but I'm going to read off some thoughts here on it. And, again, I think this was very hard. I considered Robbie Lawler. I did. But it was just, I know he had that one loss, and for some reason that just bugged me. I know it was a close fight, a fight he could have won, but it just kind of bugged me when there were so many guys that had years where they didn't lose. And I went with a guy known as the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, who went 4-0 this year, beating some top 10 guys, 3 of those being finishes, including exciting finishes, as Dave already alluded to earlier with his fight against Adriel Martins. He also had the amazing head kick knockout of Jim Miller in his hometown in Atlantic City, and he also had that comeback finish against Edson Barbosa, whereas it looked like he was about to get knocked out. He comes back, pulls a submission out of nowhere, and beats Edson Barbosa. And then, of course, he fought Eddie Alvarez at UFC 178. Eddie Alvarez, a lot of people thought, if he beats Cowboy, he gets a title shot. Well, the Cowboy soundly beat him for 15 minutes. And he is on the cusp of being one fight away from a UFC title shot, something he has not gotten yet and he so desperately wants. And I'm not sure if too many people have had a better year than Mr. Cowboy Cerrone. So that is my pick for Fighters of the Year. And as Dave mentioned, before we end the broadcast, he gave us a bonus category. Since we are reviewing 2014, let's take a quick look at looking at 2015. As he threw out, what do we think is going to be the biggest news story of 2015? And we'll start first with Aaron, with your thoughts on that.
I got 2, Brock Lesnar and CM Punk. That's all you're going to hear 2015. Especially CM Punk. We're still waiting about the Brock Lesnar, but it's going to be CM Punk nonstop until the guy fights.
I think, especially if Brock Lesnar goes to Bellator.
Yeah.
That will be a big deal.
Right, because they said Scott Coker's trying to get Fedor, and they always want to make Brock and Fedor fight, so we could be seeing maybe throwing Fedor's name in there too.
Dave, since you came up with the category, I will get to you in just a second and go to Ray Flores.
I would
Ray,
have to.
That's what you call a swerve.
That was absolutely terrific. I would have to say, guys, the biggest story of 2015 is going to be Conor McGregor's title shot against Jose Aldo. I think that is going to transpire. I think he walks right through Dennis Stever. And I wonder still, though, if the UFC is going to have the bravado to do a stadium show. Only reason why I have reservations on that, guys, is let's say McGregor drops out a month before and everything's already been booked. That is a very risky proposition. But I think Conor McGregor will get his title shot against Jose Aldo. I just don't know if the UFC, because it is such risky business to do a stadium show outside. but I think we are going to see the Notorious One get that world title opportunity. And you want to talk about a build-up for that fight. Jose Aldo can't even speak to a door, or at least not in English, and nothing against that, but he's not made a conscientious effort to learn even a little bit the language. And when you are trying to be a crossover star here in the United States and around the world, you have to do that instead of just having your interpreter. And I don't like that. But Conor McGregor is going to be the be-all, end-all when it comes to the lead-up for that fight. So Conor McGregor, without question, getting his title shot against Aldo.
Do you think Conor's going to win, Ray?
I think he has a very good opportunity. I think he has a very good chance. I think his style matches up very well with Jose Aldo. If Aldo has a tough weight cut, which has been the case for the past couple of fights with him, McGregor knows how to cut his weight at 145. I think McGregor may win the world title. And if that happens, oh my goodness, you want to talk about a new era dawning in the octagon? It'll be the Notorious One. And I'm not talking about the BIG, but I'm kind of borrowing term from BIG himself. Sky is the limit for Conor McGregor. You want to talk about being on the Wheaties box? This guy's going to be everywhere and anywhere.
Yeah.
All right, I have a couple of items. I don't know if it'll be the biggest news story, but one thing at least we got to look for in 2015 will be the Reebok deal. That will be implemented in July of next year. So it'll be interesting to see the final 6 months of next year, how that all works out, whether fighters like it, whether they don't like it, whether Reebok sales go through the roof, being partnered with the UFC and all that. I think that will be a very developing story as 2015 moves on. But the UFC has gotten, I believe, they're now up to 3 antitrust lawsuits now, or somewhere, or it's at least one, maybe 2, and I think that will be interesting in 2015. If then these lawsuits actually get into court, if any decisions are made, if any stories are made, if any changes are made by the UFC to help counteract some of these changes as well. And my last one will be that Vitor Belfort becomes the 3rd fighter in UFC history to win a belt at 2 different weight classes. So we'll get to Dave, and no one will comment on that, and his future story headlines for 2015.
You don't want me to comment on yours?
No, not at all. No, I'm kidding. No, anyone can comment. I just wanted to be very coy about that.
No, the Reebok deal, I think, yeah, it's a big deal, but it's only going to be a part of the story. The lawsuit thing could very well be the most important story of 2018, as long as they drag their feet on that. And I'm glad you brought up Vitor winning against Chris Weidman and becoming, what'd you say, the first person in 3 weight classes? You said?
No, he would be the 3rd person to win a title in 2 different weight classes, following, of course, Randy Couture and BJ Penn.
Okay. With the UFC going global, and John Jones has a big time deal, Ronda Rousey's big time deal, Chris Weidman's the All-American. I'm going to throw this out there, and I really want to hear what you guys have to say. Can the UFC go through a year? They've got big fights. Give me that real quick. I don't know if you knew this, but the time is now. What I want to know is, can the UFC go through 2015 and lose Jones, Weidman, and Rousey? Because arguably in all 3 of their fights, Cormier, Vitor, and Kat all have legitimate chances of winning the belt. Can they move forward with those 3 essentially being, the top 3 guys, or the top 3 faces of the company? And then, like Ray was saying, if McGregor gets that shot and wins, it's kind of like a new guard. We don't have Aldo, Jones, Weidman, Rousey, who we've had for the last year and a half, 2 years. I think that's a very interesting take.
Yeah, if all 3 of those guys lose, and then Ray is alluding to Conor McGregor possibly coming champion, the UFC I think would be fine. But if McGregor doesn't he's not successful in his bid for the title, and those 3 gentlemen that you mentioned lose, that I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it could spell for a drastic change in viewership or reflection or sponsorship with those fighters not in place as the champion.
Guys, let's not make any mistake about it, and maybe I'm just mere speculation, but I would gather that the UFC has a preference in terms of who would win that featherweight title matchup between McGregor and Aldo. And if, as Dave mentioned, Cormier defeats John Jones, if Rousey loses to Zingano, or in his words, a win Rousey loses to Zingano.
That's right.
And what they would have to be cheering for Conor McGregor, because Cormier, although he's very personable, is still an unknown entity. You had John Jones, who most recently was sponsored by Nike, who's still people know him, a common sports fan. The common entertainment fan knows who Ronda Rousey is. Jose Aldo, great fighter, but nobody knows him who's a common sports fan. No one even cares, to be honest with you. McGregor wins, everybody cares, and the UFC is going to hitch their wagon. And what is that? That used to be an old movie, I think. Hitch your wagon. The UFC is going to try to hitch their wagon to Conor McGregor. Pettis is great. He's a terrific young fighter, but McGregor has that extra something. He's got that extra spice. Pettis is just a good, personable young man, but McGregor's got that spice behind it. He's got flavor, and oh boy, does he sizzle.
All right, well, to wrap things up, of course, we got to mention some of our friends that didn't join us. Sean Smith from MMAinsider.net. For those of you who have been following Beyond the Cage from the start, you may remember Sean Smith was one of our first media guests we had on. He originally wrote stuff for MMAsucka.com. He kind of had bounced around between different MMA sites and different jobs within Canada, but he's back in Ontario. And I mentioned to Chuck Grace, who wasn't able to join us today, that Sean is a very talented writer and I think would be a welcome addition to your site. They got to talking, and for the past about 2 months or so, Sean has been writing for MMAinsider.net, of course, one of our affiliate websites. So I was glad to see Sean kind of come back and working and be affiliated kind of with us, and we hope to have him on again real soon, and was glad that he was able to at least send in his picks, though he couldn't join us live and in person like he has in the past. Of course, Ryan and all the great work he does at MMAforlife.ca. Again, thanks for sending in your picks and appreciate that. And, of course, Steve Sadler from Vigilante MMA. The folding chair line was great, and even when he's not here, he's still able to say something funny. So thanks, fellas, for sending in those picks, and of course to the sites they represent that helps Beyond the Cage out. Of course, AJ Hiller at MMAsignatures.com. If you haven't been following their news, they just signed a new deal with Jessica Evil Eye, one of our friends of the show. So if you've been looking to get Jessica Evil Eye autographed memorabilia, which there isn't that much out there, AJ very, very soon will have a lot to offer for you, so you'll be able to go out and add some Jessica Eye stuff to your collection if you're looking for any of that. So that's really cool that he was two of our friends were able to get together and get signed a deal. So of course, last we'll mention BluegrassMMA.com covering the local scene, and they're doing their awards for the states that they cover very soon. If they haven't done already, I'll have to double check. But if you're on the local scene in the Midwest, Bluegrass MMA covers it, and check out their kind of award show coming up here for 2014. All right, again, thanks to Ray for coming on the show once again of ESPN 1000 Chicago. You can follow him on Twitter at Ray Flores 86. And once again, great insight as always, Ray, and appreciate you coming on the show.
Jim, I want to say that you and the Juice right here in the Beyond the Cage podcast, my goodness, what a 2014 for you guys. And I know that you guys don't want to pat yourselves on the back. Well, let me do that for you. Figuratively, I am putting my hand, just giving you guys a big thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, as Siskel and Ebert used to do when they used to review quality movies. You get 2 thumbs up, 4 stars, which is the maximum that I can give when it comes to a movie reference to what you guys are doing week in, week out, day in, day out. You guys make me laugh. You don't make me cry. You entertain me. You inform me. You guys are encyclopedias. You follow the game like nobody's business. And at the end of the day, more important than anything, you call it down the middle. You don't decide to take this sport of MMA, one of the greatest sports in the world, and put it into a candy chamber and sugarcoat things. You don't take it into Willy Wonka's little house of candy and sugarcoat anything. You call it as you see it. And for that, gentlemen, that makes you guys, as Robbie Lawler is in MMA, an original gangster. That makes you true to who you are and true to the fans, and that's all we can ask for. And we thank you for being who you are every single week on the Beyond the Cage podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Ray. We appreciate it. And I think it has been a great year for the show. And Aaron, you're definitely one of the guys that have listened to the show from the very start, so it was cool to have you on, get another perspective. And, yeah, thanks for coming on and keeping Dave in line over there.
No, I appreciate it, guys. I'm also at AJ Roll Tide 72. Go Bama. And, no, you guys are awesome. I listen to you, and I was one of the first people also for Vigilante MMA. I put it on my Facebook page, to listen to you guys, and not just because Dave's a good friend, but you guys are really talented, and so is Ray. Dave's got me listening to Ray and ESPN 1000, so I gotta support my guys and my family. So you guys continue great success, and I will try to support you the best I can.
Well, we appreciate it, and of course, to my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler, with some great picks, some great jokes. I mean, definitely. Our combination, Ray said we're not going to pat ourselves on the back a little bit. I just think we have the perfect blend. You definitely add the color commentary, and I don't think the show would be as entertaining without the Juice, because I would have never thought to do that with the Ortiz Bonner thing. And then you're like, you saw an opportunity for a joke, and you took it, and that was great.
Hey, I'm not going to pat us on the back, but what I am going to do.
Oh man, he's learning. He actually had it queued up this time, guys.
I know. I've had it queued up for like 45 minutes.
There you go. All right. You learned from it. All right.
I learned my lesson.
Dave won't tell you, but he had a little bit of a hint with that Bonner thing.
Hey, that's all right. Hey, don't. Aaron's off the show. Don't. Show's over. Sorry, Aaron. No more input.
And once again, Dave is on Twitter at Vigilante Juice.
Hey, before I know Ray, you did your outro already, but we forgot to ask you. You got anything coming up at the beginning of the year? Any big events or anything?
I'm actually doing Friday Night Fights, January 16th. That is we are in Verona, New York. And then I'll be back on Friday Night Fights, February 13th and the 20th. So we have the Boxino tournament that is going to be kicking off. I believe we have light heavyweights and heavyweights. So the new star when it comes to the sport of boxing is going to be born, and also some local MMA and stuff that's around and everything else. And, guys, like I said, continued success in 2015. I think it's going to be a massive year. I know a lot of people around the country and around the world, for that matter, are taking notice. And more than anything, also, Happy New Year to all your listeners and all those that watch.
You too, sir.
All right, once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter. Once again, I hope everyone had a great Christmas, Boxing Day, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. And, of course, have a great New Year's and a 2015 to start off the year. And we want to thank each and every listener that has tuned into an episode of Beyond the Cage, whether it's on YouTube with our kind of brand new live format that we've been rolling out for the majority here of 2014, or whether the people that started listening out as just an audio podcast that continue to listen to the audio podcast. We want to thank all the fighters and all the media members and all our friends that have come on this show and has helped bring something else to the show to give people a reason to listen each and every week. And, of course, we've got to thank our great friends and presenting sponsor of Jake and Elizabeth Nusser at Fight Chicks for sponsoring the show, putting their name on the show, and being attached with what we're trying to do here in the world of mixed martial arts. So for Ray Flores, for Aaron Smith, and for Dave Sadler, I am Jim Gramm, and thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.